Hello and welcome to House of Strauss. We are joined by podcast extraordinaire Andrew Sharp. If you don't recognize this intro, you should, because if you listen to the GOAT podcast, you would. How you doing, Andrew?
A+ execution. I'm flattered and impressed. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you on such an occasion. NBA Finals, do we call it? We don't call it Eve. It's a long lead up to the NBA Finals.
Yeah. I have really enjoyed this little 10-day interregnum we've gotten here before the finals, because we got to take a break while the NBA, the WNBA, had a little race war breakout for everybody. We got Lakers news on the eve, and the break has really cranked up the anticipation for a matchup that honestly looks pretty fantastic. I'm excited.
I was just thinking about your mention of the WNBA race war. It really feels, and the people who live in California will know what I mean, when there are wildfires and you wonder how it's all going, and they go, oh, it's about 70% contained. It's about 70%. That's how I'm envisioning it.
I hit my breaking point on consuming WNBA news like 72 hours ago, but it could continue all summer here. I'm not sure if the wildfire will ever be totally contained, so we'll have to wait and see.
No, it will flare up and it will flare out, and there is interest in it. I know people who just want to tap out of all of it, but we've got a lot of consumer interest. I've got emails like you guys get at the GOAT. You've got these emails from people who have different takes. Well, to give a little PTI scroll of the mind, plus whatever Andrew wants to add to it, I believe we will talk about some finals. We will talk about this whole Woj versus Shams, Dan Hurley, Laker coach, whatever the hell that is right there. And we will talk about, since you do podcast about business with the genius Ben Thompson, the NBA seemingly tripling its rights fees as the ratings are, I don't know, slackening, sluggish, whatever you want to call it. So that's my PTI scroll of the mind, plus whatever else you want to add. Does that sound good?
So do we have to bow down to Adam Silver here? Is that what the end of the podcast is going to be? Does he own this podcast now after pulling off this rights miracle?
I mean, that was the provocative question I was going to ask. I was going to ask, does this make Adam Silver the best sports commissioner? And I was thinking a little bit, maybe we'll start with this. We'll start with the triple the fees. It's a little bit like that line from Dave Attell that a good friend will help you move, but a great friend will help you move a body. And here's what I mean. A good commissioner like Roger Goodell will increase your ratings just incredibly and give you great ratings and maintain that. A great commissioner will see it all decline and then triple your rights fees. That is the rabbit out of the hat trick. I'm looking for the tweet about it right here from Andrew Brandt, business reporter. Oh boy, am I so organized that I have misplaced this.
This is how the sausage is made. I love it.
This is how it all gets made. People, true podcasters like this podcast, like true restaurant aficionados like the Bear, right? They know. They know. He says, with stagnant or even declining ratings, NBA is going from $25 billion to $75 billion in media rights deals. With major sports leagues, ratings are secondary. They are have-to-haves for networks, and bidding creates leverage and options. The NFL's $110 billion deal is now a bargain. And Daniel Kaplan of Kaplan Sports Biz says, we all in the sports media cover TV ratings obsessively, yet the NBA about to triple rights fees while playoff ratings are down 14%. I'll give a thought or two before teeing Andrew up on all of that. I think saying it doesn't matter is a little crazy, because if the NBA ratings had gone up significantly, then they would have gotten like tens of billions more. So what it really, I think, means is that they had maintained it enough to cash in on what is great about them and how they can deliver a big audience. So I think it's more that the ratings didn't tell the whole story. Is that what we're saying right now? Make sense of this business, Andrew. Do it for me. Explain it all, how this can all happen.
Well, I want to be clear that Adam Silver does deserve real credit for pulling this off and executing it, and not only pulling it off and stabilizing things, but I mean, he is signing a deal or a series of deals that is going to make NFL owners really jealous of the NBA, which nobody would have expected. The NFL deals do look like a bargain relative to what the NBA is getting. Granted, the NBA has a lot more inventory to sort of split up among bidders like that. As far as does this make Adam Silver the best commissioner, there's been a lot of talk in that vein. And I think he deserves credit for getting these deals across the finish line. But I also feel like the way Adam Silver is remembered is going to be more complicated than signed a number of incredibly historically lucrative television deals. And so there have been a lot of people basically saying everyone owes Adam Silver an apology. And I just think it's more nuanced than that. And the way commissioners are remembered are essentially as caretakers of the league. And the NBA has declined in a lot of tangible ways under Silver's watch. And that will matter more when it's time to talk about Silver's legacy. Like, I got into an argument with somebody about this back when the rumors.
Arguing?
Well, when the rumors started to leak that this was going to be very close to tripling the rights fees, just like everyone predicted 2 years ago. And then a year ago, everyone was sort of skeptical of that claim.
Yeah.
Silver deserves a ton of credit for that. But I just feel like what he's doing is capably using his leverage, using the league's leverage to extract value. But I think another commissioner could have done similar. And what would really impress me and where he would really deserve credit is if he used this windfall to sort of restructure the sport and better position it for the future. But he's not doing that. That would be the sort of, wow, we need to take a step back and really appreciate Silver as a visionary. But he hasn't really done that. He's just sort of going through the motions in terms of what any commissioner would do in his spot.
Yeah, I guess they're two different conversations. There's his main prerogative as the employee, if you see it that way, of these owners, and then there's his prerogative to fans if you want certain things done. And so I think he has succeeded wildly. If you own an NBA team, I mean, you just have to be delighted with Adam Silver. I don't see how you could go any other way about it.
Right.
If you feel like you want the game to go in certain directions and don't think it's fulfilling what it needs to. I mean, what's interesting about it to me is this. I didn't know the number breakdown before, but somebody who knows, who, let's say, has worked for one of these networks, says that 80% of the TV money comes via the postseason. That's insane to me. That's astounding. It makes sense. And I think when we talk about how the NBA has suffered for being an inventory sport that just kind of fills the schedule, and it's not an event sport like the NFL is, and the event is this strong signal that cuts through all the noise of the modern culture, it almost seems like the eventiness of the postseason, it's just the right amount. It's the right amount of stuff. You have a lot of playoff games, and there are enough of events that they've really cashed in on it. But it is
2.5 months long, so you can profit for a while there.
Yes, day after day after day. But it's an interesting thing where people still don't quite know what to do with this whole NBA regular season. And maybe this could be a pivot where I say perhaps we should be rooting for the Celtics, Andrew, to validate the NBA season, because Adam Silver has lost his incentive to make it matter. He's cashed out. He's got senioritis at this point. The Boston Celtics have won 64 games. Doesn't seem like anybody is particularly scared of them. And yet, I wrote this down from your delightful podcast that you do with Ben Golliver. You said, everything this Celtics team stands for represents everything I don't want basketball to be.
Yes.
Can we get into that? We can return to some of the business. There's a lot there. I need the business explained to me more, but I would be remiss to not throw that out to you and get an explanation.
Yes, well, and it's NBA Finals Eve here, as we mentioned at the top.
Yes.
Yeah. So with the Celtics, I mean, it's been entertaining to hear Celtics fans point to the record this year and the point differential and the playoff run against a bunch of patsies in the East, and then wonder, why is Boston not getting more respect? And for me, I think the simple answer is that this is a team that just fails the eye test for people. We've seen great teams in the past, and then we've seen the Celtics, and it just looks so mechanical for the Celtics. And to be fair to them, one thing I didn't mention on the GOAT, they've obviously been really successful in some big moments. Like Tatum specifically gets crushed for some of the playoff failures, but he was phenomenal at the end of the Bucks series 2 years ago. He also took over the fourth quarter against the Sixers on the road in a pretty massive Game 6 last year. So it's not like they've never come through, but there have just been so many shaky performances in the clutch over the years. And those failures resonate more with people than a bunch of blowout wins during the regular season. And with this team, I don't hate the Celtics or their fans. Like, that's one reason a lot of people are rooting against the Celtics, is they're just like, I hate Boston, I hate Celtics fans, blah, blah, blah. I think their fans are phenomenal, and I had a great time every time I went to playoff games in Boston. I've had a bunch of good interactions with actual people who work for the Celtics when I was doing full-time NBA work. But this particular team, it's just so lifeless, and they're bad in big moments. And every time you question them, you'll have some dork say, well, the point differential says this is one of the best teams the league has ever seen. And I'm just so tired of that conversation. So I think the Celtics are going to win this series, but I would be much more excited to see the Mavs do it and stick it to this particular Celtics team.
Yeah, there is this cohort of people in the analysis of basketball, and it's not that, I mean, look, point differential can be predictive, and it is probably a better indicator of quality than regular season wins, but it can turn into this assumption that you can almost march into the playoffs wielding your point differential as a weapon. And if things are going wrong, you just blast somebody with your point differential, and things happen. Guys get injured. There are matchup problems. It's not so simple. And I think there's even a good argument for the regular season just bearing less resemblance to what we see in the postseason than ever before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you can get away with playing the percentages. 3 is more than 2, and just sort of hammering that strategy away during the regular season. But when things get tight in the fourth quarter of playoff games, being able to make tough twos matters. And one of the things that drives me crazy with this Celtics team is...
Wait a second. Does it matter, or do you want it to matter?
I want it to matter. That's a great way to articulate it. I want it to matter. I'm not sure that it does. I think the Celtics could win the title here, having never addressed the crunch time issues, because they've got a really balanced attack offensively. I think the Mavs are a tad bit overrated. But what drives me crazy with the team is even the players themselves and Coach Mazzulla, like, they can lose and miss 83s in crunch time. And then post game, Mazzulla will get all indignant if you ask about the fourth quarter and ask whether they should have tried to drive to the basket, like once or twice, to try to mix it up a little bit. It's like they resent the implication that maybe you need to take better shots and be more creative in close games and be more creative about the way you approach offense. And maybe I'm going to be wrong at the end of all this, and they'll be lifting the Larry O'Brien trophy. I actually expect that's how this is going to go.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I don't have a firm take on it, but I understand this idea of the drive and kick seeming sterile in a way, and there being no magic to it. And that was one of my issues sometimes when I would watch European basketball or FIBA style basketball. And maybe this is like how people don't like the Moneyball effect on baseball and what it turned baseball into, that this Celtics team could represent that to a degree, that you don't even need to be good at the nooks and crannies or to be creative or to have this even individual brilliance. This is the way to play, and that way to play is just not as charismatic as what we've seen before. I don't have a deep opinion on it. I don't think the way they play makes me angry. It doesn't make me angry. I think I'm totally, this is very rare. I am firmly apathetic as to the outcome.
Oh boy.
Either way.
It's a good place to be.
Even.
Well, and I don't love the Mavs either, so I don't know whether this is apathy, but I've accepted that I'm going to be unhappy whoever wins this series, and that's fine too.
I shouldn't say apathy. I will watch and I will enjoy it, by the way. I don't want to. This isn't a guy talking about something. Nobody held a gun to my head. I run this site.
The 10-day break here. We're both excited to see what happens. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people who don't really know how this series is going to play out. Like, I think a lot of people just default to the Celtics. A lot of people in the media, that is, default to the Celtics because the numbers favor them and everything else. If you really talk to them, there isn't that much confidence in a Celtics pick, or the people who are picking the Mavs are not all that confident. And that's a great place to be as a sports fan.
It feels similar to the Super Bowl, where a lot of the sharp money, gambling expert money was on the Niners. But Joe Public went, well, I'm not going against Mahomes. That's insane. I'm not doing that. I'm going with the Chiefs. There's a little bit of that to this, where the analytics say Celtics all the way, but they've got two closers on the Mavericks. And so I think I haven't surveyed Joe Public. I don't know where Joe Sports Fan is on this, but I've seen a lot more. I'm feeling the Mavericks because of that. And anybody, as you've said, who backs the Celtics does so nervously. They're nervous backers of the Celtics. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last time we saw this Celtics team in the finals, it was basically everything I want to believe about basketball. It was like the Warriors coming up huge and playing like legit Hall of Famers down the stretch in that series. It wasn't just Steph. It was Clay having a big quarter here and there and helping them defensively. And it was Draymond just absolutely punking what felt like the entire Celtics team. Like, they just sort of short-circuited down the stretch of that series, and the mental toughness wound up making the difference. And it was on the Celtics side. I think one of the issues people have with this Celtics team is that they're just boring. You know, they're sort of a slightly better version of the Atlanta Hawks of 2016, whenever that team won like player of the month for their 5 starters that nobody really cared about. This seems like a rich man's version of that team. And it would just be a lot more thrilling if Luka went and got this done. Kyrie in the revenge series against Boston. Like, that's a far more entertaining storyline.
Yeah, well, it's if Luka wins, then he is regarded as the best player right now, and Kyrie's legacy has been altered in a way, and now he is this all-time great running mate, versus if the Celtics win, we'll stop making fun of Jason Tatum for 2 or 3 months. That seems to be the stakes right there.
I mean, the Celtics, they're sort of like, if you go back to the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry of our youth, this Celtics team is more like the Yankees, where there's a lot of players there that just sort of go about their business and they're pretty vanilla. And then you look at the Mavs and there's just a lot more character, and they're sort of beating the odds in every single round, and a lot more fun to root for. But the Celtics are playing the Yankees role for the next 2 weeks.
Here's what made me want to root for the Mavericks. It was Jason Kidd getting asked about all the haters who doubted the Kyrie trade, and instead of taking the obvious bait, going the other way and basically saying, hey, it's okay to be wrong. I mean, I felt that. That's not something I see enough in athletics, where there's a lot of nobody believes in us and whatnot. I just thought I never see anybody handle it that way. I don't know why it's so rare, but that's one thing I liked. But then again, I want to root for the Celtics because there's been this nickname, this derisive nickname for Jason Tatum on the internet, I've noticed. NBA Brock Purdy, which is one of these great nicknames that can annoy multiple fan bases at once.
Has logged on.
Yes.
Nothing wrong
sports.
with being the NBA Brock Purdy.
Jason Tatum should be so lucky as to have a first full season like Brock Purdy. I mean, my God. I mean, for this to be an insult for Tatum, Purdy should be insulted by such a thing. But yet, it makes me want to root for Tatum just because of that. So there you go.
Let's talk about that completion percentage here on NBA Finals Eve. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, he's probably going to get it done. Baby. It's a good omen for Brock next year as he returns. Have they signed him to a new deal yet?
They've got to wait for that. They are legally bound to wait. And it's good clickbait because then everybody gets to argue. I mean, the thing going on with Purdy, the muse of 2023 for this website, is that visually and draft status wise, nobody expects him to be a star. So then you can have a lot of arguments about what he has done stacked up against that kind of expectations. So you just get so much clickbait where, would you pay Brock Purdy $50 million? What about 55? What about 60? And then everybody can yell at each other. So we've got about a year of that, unless there's an injury or something like it.
Yes. Well, I look forward to whatever he signs for, because whatever he signs for is going to look a little ridiculous. But to your point, he's perfectly solid, and the Niners are Super Bowl contenders every year. So I'm sure he'll earn his money.
Perfectly solid. Look at the provocation. We can't be responding to it. Spike Eskin, our guy, went on Bay Area radio and said that Eagles fans would laugh at such a signing and that he's comparable to Daniel Jones. And then I was asked about it it was strange to just be asked about what your friend said when you're on radio.
Great. Well, I think that's where you just start launching into personal attacks on Spike and some of his worst takes over the years. But
it's like you don't even know some of the terrible takes this guy has had. And I mean, look, we're not going to get into a whole conversation about this. It's not football yet, although they are doing football's so weird. They do OTAs, then mini camp, then training camp. It just feels like it should be all the same thing. You know, these football players, they don't have vacations, proper vacations. And in
talking to you offline, you are locked in all year round to football these days. I am not prepared for a Brock Purdy conversation. I am bringing a knife to a gunfight with that particular argument. But I have enjoyed your sort of newfound football fandom.
Do you know how strong his thighs are? Do you understand that? That's a talking point right now.
Start breaking down the squat numbers. Absolutely. Tis the season, mid-June.
Football is interesting to me in this way versus what we're discussing with basketball. I don't think it's been quite money-ballified, and I don't think it's been completely disrupted by analytics, in part because to have a job in it, you have to be such an eye test psycho to get hired that they haven't really brought in the analytics nerds. And I think that actually undergirds a lot of conversations like the Brock Purdy. You wouldn't even really have a conversation like that with NBA, because if a guy was just producing like crazy, then people would go, well, he's great. He's clearly top 5. Football is still this province of the subjective, and that we don't totally know why what happens. And there are so many guys on a team that we don't know whether to credit the guy doing what he's doing. So I think that's one of the reasons you can have that conversation. Basketball, it just turns into, I don't think he can get it done in the fourth quarter of the NBA Finals type of deal.
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot of things that you can't measure with football. Like Dre Greenlaw is just an absolute psychopath. And that is what makes him great. And I think he has sort of an intangible effect on the rest of the defense. Probably also has a lot of tangible effects. I'm out of my depth here, but when you look
correct
at
on this.
yeah, when you look at there are stories like that all over every single roster in football, such that if you're trying to quantify any of it, eventually you hit a point of diminishing returns. Whereas basketball, it is easier to quantify what 5 guys are doing or what the individual impact of one guy is doing. But there's still some mystery to it. Basketball is not baseball. Baseball is the far end of the spectrum. Basketball, there's enough mystery to what happens. Even if you go back to the 2022 finals where it was Celtics Warriors, the numbers said the Celtics were overwhelming favorites in that series. And down the stretch, there was a mental aspect to the series that the numbers couldn't really quantify. So that's why over the last 10 days, even as the Celtics look like overwhelming favorites, there's enough room to have a little fun with what might happen.
Yeah, this is a more fun finals than Nuggets Heat, and I look forward to watching it. I'm hoping to take it. Yeah.
The other thing that I would add is if we're talking football, if I wanted to make the case for the Mavs, one reason to think the Mavs could do this is we've entered this new era of basketball where parity reigns, and we've entered that era without totally realizing it. And it's possible that moving forward, we're going to see more NBA titles that feel like Super Bowls, where it's not always the best team that wins, but sometimes you're going to get a team that just goes on a run like the Giants did in their Super Bowl wins over the Patriots 10 years ago. And the Mavs are just catching fire at the right time and looking unstoppable. If Dallas ends up winning it, I think that's how I would probably understand what the last couple months have been, because they're really solid across the board. Luka's unbelievable, obviously, but there's a lot of history that says this just never happens in the NBA. Teams don't come together on the fly and end up winning a title a few months later. But
your
maybe we're
superstar
in a
can't
different
be
era.
fat. Your perimeter superstar can't be fat.
A lot of conventional wisdom going out the window here.
I know. I know our guy Kirk Henderson gets very defensive whenever people call Luka fat. I think it should be owned. I think it's amazing. It's humiliating not just to get beat, but to get beat by a guy who's legitimately out of shape. Yeah, that's dominance right there. That if Luka, the idea that he could claim status as the best player and he is not even doing all he could do to be fit, I mean, that's rather remarkable.
I mean, look, if you go back to the Western Conference Finals, I loved Anthony Edwards on the way into that series. I had dreams of Anthony Edwards upstaging Luka in the West Finals, and I have called Luka out of shape for his entire career. But through the West Finals, the guy who was exhausted and looked out of shape was Anthony Edwards, and Luka was completely fine. So he probably is carrying an extra 30 pounds, but it hasn't mattered.
So wait, what is that? You've got that weird thing, that American basketball fandom right there. Is that what that is right there? Where you're wanting Edwards to prevail over Luka? You're a bit of a basketball jingoist, a basketball nationalist. I am too, to a degree, but not so much that it impacts my ability to judge what will happen. You, sir, clearly biased with red, white, and blue colored lenses. I mean, God.
I'm an unapologetic basketball patriot. I'm psyched for the Paris Olympics, although I don't know, I'm not that psyched to have another Olympic team oriented around LeBron James. But I'm excited. I will defend my patriotism to the bitter end. What was happening in the West Finals was really two things, because on the one hand, Anthony Edwards, I just find him really refreshing as a basketball fan. Like, I think relative to some of the other young players who have hit the league over the last 5 years or so, there is so much less. I just feel like a lot of young players. Precious. Yeah, he's not precious. He's not freighted with the sort of moodiness and insecurity we've seen from other stars that have emerged, even guys like Tatum. But also there've been a lot of disappointments, whether it's John Morant or Zion Williamson. Yep. And there's just a genuine charisma and authenticity with Anthony Edwards that has been refreshing as a basketball fan. Like, the more you pay attention to him, the more impressed you are. Whereas a lot of his younger peers, the more you pay attention, the more you're tempted to eye roll. And so I wanted to see his story get as crazy as it possibly could through this playoff run. But then he ran into Luka Doncic.
Yeah. He's just incredible, and we know basically nothing about him other than that he likes to scream at the refs and opposing fans. We don't know much about him, and that's fine. Whatever he's doing seems to be working. Okay, I think here's what I think we should do. I think we should circle back, as they say in corporate speak, to some of the TV business stuff. But before that, we got to get into whatever is going on with Adrian Wojnarowski versus Shams Charania over who's going to be coach of the Lakers. I fell asleep fairly early last night, and then I awoke to all these text messages to this end. First of all, I didn't even know that so much of the JJ Redick as Lakers coach narrative was propelled by Shams. I didn't know that. It's kind of reached this point for me where the news breaking happens and I've detached from whatever the source was. I just knew it was out there. I knew people were talking about it. I knew that it was an interesting story because he does this podcast, JJ Redick does, with LeBron James, where they sip wine and stroke their chins and talk about how great basketball is in a fancy way, and make Spike, the aforementioned
minding the game. Yeah, yes, absolutely, man. This is a big win for fans of Mind the Game podcast. So congrats to that contingent.
Or it was, until Adrian Wojnarowski stomps in and says the Lakers are preparing a massive contract offer for UConn coach Dan Hurley to be coach of the Lakers. And I suppose in his reporting, there were these subtle digs at Shams. And what do you make of it? I didn't even know. I didn't know that this was part of a reporter proxy war until this whole thing happened. And now that's part of it. And yes, just go. Dan Hurley to the Lakers. JJ Redick calling the NBA Finals as this job is potentially wrenched away from him.
Yeah.
Go.
Well, it's bittersweet news because on the one hand, all of this has been very entertaining. I'd love it basically anytime everyone gets the story wrong. On the other hand, it does mean that JJ Redick stays in the media to continue driving me crazy with his
reign of terror
indefinitely. So I don't know. The Shams Woj aspect of this, I gotta say, one of the first times, maybe the first time I ever felt truly old was roughly 10 years ago, where I discovered like the bizarre subset of Twitter that follows the Shams Woj war pretty closely. And there's all these weird memes, and it's like, oh, Woj dunked on Shams this morning. How is Shams going to respond? I truly don't care about any of that, and I don't understand why people do, but I guess that's an element of the story here. I'm more interested in JJ Redick being relegated to announcing.
When you think about what it actually means, it's like, oh, shit, Woj got a phone call from Dan Hurley today, and then he just fucking rubbed Shams' face in it.
And it's like, oh, this is why Woj is the king. Well, I don't know. I mean, apparently the Lakers have been interested for the last month. Nobody knew any of that. So I guess we're not learning anything we weren't always going to learn as the Lakers zero in or target Dan Hurley, as Woj reported today. And the back and forth, who breaks what first, I just could not give less of a shit about that particular ongoing blood feud. But it
Did
is a
something
weird
happen?
dynamic with Shams. I don't know how he was sort of used as a pawn by the Lakers throughout all of this.
I'm just speculating on this, and I will do some digging on it. Did something happen between Redick and Woj behind the scenes? Because as I look over this article, this Woj article, it really seems like he's rubbing it in, where he's talking about LeBron James, and he says, in a social media post responding to a podcast interview with JJ Redick, James posted on X about Hurley. He's so damn good, all caps, along with his staff. Super creative with their offense. Love it. It just, what is happening here? It's just very bizarre, very strange that Redick clearly wants this job and is going to be calling the NBA Finals as this is all taking place. Will he sound distracted? I want peak Redick. If I'm not getting peak Redick during my finals call, I'm calling ESPN up right now. I'm complaining.
Yeah, I mean, I complained about JJ Redick on my podcast this week, and I don't know if my issue is with JJ or the people who celebrate JJ, because honestly, when I think about why he annoys me, on one hand, over the last few years, there have been a number of times, and I think you have talked about this on your podcast with Spike Eskin. There have been a number of times where JJ has gone on TV at ESPN and he's just been deliberately obstinate and generally speaking, sort of a bad teammate with the people he's on TV with, where he'll adopt the worst faith interpretation of a point someone's making, whether it's perk or I think a couple years ago, he was on TV with Chris Russo a bunch. And then the clip goes viral for JJ basically scolding someone and making them look stupid or racist or whatever it may be. And I just find the whole shtick so annoying. You could have. I mean, anybody could be a bad teammate.
It's not the 90s anymore, Andrew. The 90s are over.
Yeah, exactly.
Things have moved on. Sorry, there's progress. I know it gets a little threatening to you that they're looking over the analytics.
3 is more than 2,
Yeah. A lot of people don't think drive and kick basketball is bad. The 90s are over. Yeah, it's
terrible. And I'm someone who talks to other people for a living, and I'm good at making people look good. So it just bugs me when someone is so consistently hanging teammates out to dry the way JJ did. The other grievance I have is that a lot of what he's doing, he's perfected the art of never saying anything interesting and basically just relaying a bunch of really generic basketball Twitter talking points, but presenting it in a way that appeals to a certain sort of overeducated Twitter user. And somehow that's made him the preeminent basketball announcer that the NBA has. And that's where I don't blame him, because he's really good at what he does. But I wish he weren't so exalted by the fellow media members out there.
I live in a glass house on this. I was just burping and trying to do it subtly and have it not be noticed for the YouTube product and failing at it. So what can I say about somebody else's podcasting? Well, it's hard. I screw myself. I drink the soda stream during the podcast. It's a terrible idea. I don't know why I do it, and yet I do it. Yeah, how offended would you be if you got a little talk after this is all not worked out and Ben Thompson said, you know what, we're replacing you with JJ Redick. I hate doing it. Look, he's a big name.
Yeah, he's a big name. He's been very successful. I'm sure JJ would be a terrific host of Sharp Tech and Sharp China. So I wish him nothing but the best in that endeavor.
Sharp China might be tough. Maze is dropping in for a take.
Can I drop my theory on what's going on here?
Please do.
Let's hear it. Yes.
So Shams dropped the classic zeroing in, which reminds me of when they used to spoil the draft by using different terms to say that it was a done deal.
When they do that every year. Yes.
We own a thesaurus. We get it. But Shams dropped that. JJ was mad about it. JJ's only real comment was on the Gojo and Golick show, and he said, I have other jobs. I'm a podcaster. I'm broadcasting the finals. I got stuff to do. And he said Shams will be addressed after the season. So he's gonna give that Shams a talking to. Then Woj, in classic Woj fashion, is it a big NBA day if we had 10 days off? I'm going to come up with a story out of thin air and float this Dan Hurley thing out there. One, I'm going to take a shot at Woj. Two, I'm going to deflect the pressure off of JJ, my ESPN teammate who's about to call the finals for ABC. And it's all a smokescreen. It's a smoke bomb. It's not a real Woj bomb. That's my thought.
Wow. So I don't think it's a smokescreen, but I will remember you, Maze, if 5 days from now they hired JJ Redick instead of Danny Hurley.
I don't think Hurley is going at all. JJ, I'm not positive that it's done yet, but it certainly seems like it's done.
So wait, does JJ want that Woj article that makes Dan Hurley seem like the greatest coach of all time and makes JJ sound like a podcaster?
Yes.
I guess that would make more sense overtly because they are on the same team. There's the CAA connection. I just don't know. I feel like if I was JJ and I was actually reading the article, I would feel bad. Like it might have been one of these things where, and we were recklessly
if he's already got the job, how bad could he feel?
I don't know. Like it's really pumping up Dan Hurley as Red Auerbach combined with Phil Jackson, and that's now something Laker fans can potentially get excited about, though.
Yeah. Well, the bar is low because Lakers fans were staring down the barrel of Mind the Game episodes all of next year. And it's just a really weird charade.
But they've already told themselves they like that. They've already.
I want the podcast when they're coaching LeBron. I want the podcast if Dan Hurley's coaching LeBron. Give me the podcast no matter what, please. Thank you.
Oh, gosh. I can't really comment on the podcast because I didn't make it past the first 5 minutes of the first episode where JJ is explaining basketball to us. But the Hurley side of it is also interesting to me because I feel like he's being lauded as this home run hire. It does seem like a pretty big gamble on the Lakers' part because to get him out of UConn, I'm sure they have to give him a ton of money and a ton of guaranteed years. And it seems like a reflection of how much college hoops has changed because when we were growing up, Coach K turns down the Lakers, Roy Williams turns down the Lakers. And I don't know, like 20 years ago, being the head coach of a college hoops powerhouse was probably more attractive than being an NBA coach. You just had more security, more influence, more authority. Yeah. And if you could live with recruiting, it was generally pretty great. And today, I know less about the mechanics of that universe, but it seems like the recruiting just never stops because you have to re-recruit players and keep them from transferring. And there's all kinds of drama with the conferences and money, and UConn's not a football school. So I imagine if they do actually hire Hurley, that'll be a big part of the story here in terms of why he went there.
Yeah, it seems like college coaches don't usually work out at the NBA level, though. It seems as though people get excited about it.
Set.
Yeah. Well, maybe not anymore. Maybe that's part of what's happening is that they've professionalized college sports. So you're already in a situation where you can't really tell these kids what to do. They'll just go through the transfer portal. And they'll leave. So maybe it's more similar and there's less of a chance that you're going to fail. I mean, clearly there's a Hurley to Woj connection. This seems like it's good for Hurley. If he's trying to negotiate with UConn, gives you a lot of leverage, I suppose. So that could help right there. I just still maintain that even if he wanted it, it doesn't seem good for Redick. It just feels like, hey, Laker fans, you've got this genius coach who has turned UConn into a powerhouse and your superstar loves and thinks is incredibly creative. And he's either going to be your coach or a podcaster. You get the podcaster.
Well, I don't want to denigrate the podcast medium because there have been announcers who went on to be great coaches, namely your guy, Steve Kerr. So I think it's the podcast with LeBron that has thrown people for a loop and led to a lot of side eyes. But I think JJ as a coaching prospect is fine among a bunch of unproven head coaches. I wouldn't be dreading it for that reason if I'm a Lakers fan. If I'm a Lakers fan, having lived through the last several years of LeBron serving as part-time shadow GM, he gets blamed and or credit for certain moves, but other moves. I don't know what the hell is happening in LA.
Yeah.
But if I were a Lakers fan, I'd be just really sick of the whole ordeal. And the Redick melodrama is sort of a continuation of the way the last 4 years have played out. So waking up to the Hurley news, I'd be like, all right, let's go a different direction. Let's not draft Bronny. Maybe LeBron's going to look around in free agency. I'm ready for a fresh start here. I don't want to remain on this treadmill of insanity for the next 2 or 3 years.
It does feel a little like LeBron is almost in a Howard Hughes phase where it's getting kind of weird and everybody has to run around and do the odd things that he wants to do. And it's, yes, draft my son, hire my podcast host to be coach of the team. And I just want it to he's earned it all. There's a reason he's getting it is that he is still so good. It's insane how good he is at basketball and he makes the Lakers matter enough, but he's also just in this phase where the requests are getting stranger increasingly.
Yeah, he is good. But I also feel like if you're a fan, it's much harder to connect to the teams that are built around LeBron because there's just this constant revolving door of role players. And a lot of the guys that fans typically attach themselves to are out the door a year or two after emerging. And the whole experience is a little bit soulless, at least according to Lakers fans who are the greatest of all talk email every week.
It's mind the game, Andrew. It's not heart the game.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I got to do my thought work with LeBron and JJ over the next couple of weeks here. Do you think they would keep the podcast going if Danny Hurley is the head coach? It's kind of awkward.
I mean,
or could they at least joke about this? Like they both take themselves so seriously in the videos I see of that podcast. If they can at least joke about this incident, maybe I will embrace mind the game. Maybe I'll start minding the game as we move forward.
I would love to see an episode where LeBron explains to JJ why he chose Dan Hurley over JJ. I don't think we're going to be blessed with that kind of content.
I don't think we're going that direction.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be, everybody needs to save face. So it's going to be two things. One, it will be JJ saying, well, I actually didn't want the job and, my kids and something, yada, yada. And then it will be LeBron saying that I don't even make those decisions. Those decisions are made by Rob. I just play basketball. That's what I would think. But we all know how those decisions get made. And I think the operating assumption is that JJ Redick would want to desperately be coach of the Lakers. So, yeah, this is quite the tangled web right now with the Lakers seizing the news away from the finals and from the Celtics. And yeah, I'm very entertained by the podcasting component. And I want them to continue podcasting if JJ coaches the team. Is that something you think will continue?
So I don't think that would continue. That would just be too strange. So that's why at the beginning I was like, big win for fans of the podcast.
The why we benched Rui episode. I mean, it would be
right.
It would be really
maybe
transformative.
They keep it going over the summer, but I don't think you could podcast through the regular season as the Lakers are eking out like 43 wins. But who knows? So it's a brand new era in NBA media. Yeah, I mean, if you're Redick, would you want the Lakers job? Like, that's the piece of this that I've always wondered about. It seems like he does want the Lakers job, but if I were Redick, I would think of Steve Kerr choosing between the Knicks and the Warriors and how different his trajectory would have been had he wound up coaching the Knicks. And I don't know. I would sidestep the Lakers opportunity. I would do the same if I were Dan Hurley too.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a bad job. It's superficially a great job. You get to be coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, but their superstar is middle-aged. And even if you win the championship, nobody cares, it seems, as Vogel. I mean, I guess he got one more job out of it, but nobody was like, oh, my God, the coaching job that guy did. But then again, that championship wasn't real, but that's a whole other topic to discuss anyway.
And you know what? I would credit the coach, given what we've seen from the last 2 years of the Lakers. If a coach comes into LA and is able to win a title with that roster, counting on Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves. And if D'Angelo Russell comes back, D'Angelo Russell, if you win an NBA championship relying on D'Angelo Russell, as a coach, you get lifetime immunity from me. You get credit. Yeah. So I think it would be a different story if they do it now versus the bubble title.
Yeah, I am very entertained by it. And I will use the favorite phrase of podcasters. It will be interesting to see, Andrew.
Yeah, it was interesting to wake up to. Woke up to a lot of memes about Shams.
Yeah, who I didn't know it was really driving the reporting on this, but this is how I found out. Was him being humiliated for being wrong unless he's right later on, in which case we will change our minds on this whole thing. Yes, the business of basketball is what we will discuss here. I'm interested in the future of all this, as I know you are. I think we can relate it to I think I wrote half the audience, twice the profits, and maybe it's going to be thrice, though if you really dig into the numbers, carry the one, is the WNBA bundled into that whole thing? I don't know, but it's a lot and it's above expectations. I'm kind of wondering, do you think the NBA and sports in general are going to continue the monoculture? I was thinking about it because I was looking at some reporting that suggests that ratings in sports have been going up. Out of home is a part of that and has been discussed. The out of home, that they're counting the hospitals, they're counting the airports, and it gives it a bump. But also what's driving it are just the different platforms that Nielsen is folding in. And I was thinking about it. It's true that there are more competitors for my eyeballs, my precious eyeballs. And I watch more YouTube content and everything else. But I feel like I watch more NBA games during the playoffs than I would just because I can do it on my phone. And that's this other game changer, is that there are just more places to watch sports. And so maybe just maybe sports are going to continue as part of the monoculture. Do you think that will be the case, or do you think that the emerging teenager set will just, I don't know, watch people play video games all day and it's cooked as a mainstream property?
This goes back to the finals discussion. What do I think will happen? What do I want to have happen? I would guess that the monoculture is going away. But sports are one of the last vestiges of the monoculture. NFL is truly still the monoculture. And basketball can deliver some of that. I mean, the other piece of monoculture is Netflix. If Netflix has like a killer documentary, everyone in my life will watch that documentary within a week or so, and it becomes sort of a cultural reference point. If Apple TV has a documentary, I'll know 4 people who see it, and then most of my friends will never come across it.
They'll be Damen. Just Damen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think in terms of preserving the monoculture, that is definitely the logic of spending money on these sports rights. And the linear networks just don't have a better option than trying to cling to the old model. And that's why they are willing to spend. And, we'll see how much longer that lasts. I think this is the last round of rights negotiations. And frankly, I think even the NBA recognizes that this is probably the last time they're going to be able to do this. So that's why they're signing these long deals. And nobody knows what the landscape is going to look like in 10 years or so.
Yeah, the length of the deal, very interesting. This decade-long signing, it does reflect a little bit of the one last score approach to it all. And so on the one hand, league health, incredible. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Naz Reid's going to be making $100 billion a year, or who knows what, but
yeah,
you generally want to sign shorter deals when you feel like you are on the come up. And so, I mean, look, you can't knock them for what they're signing. It makes a lot of sense. I guess I will end with,
on that point, on the length and the future. Earlier in the show, when I'm talking about what would have made Adam Silver's performance here incredibly impressive. Like, really, wow, we need to bow down and say, this is a mastermind. This is a visionary. This is the best commissioner in sports. I do think that where the NBA will run into trouble and where the diminished audience will start to matter is when some of the linear players and the bidders that they are able to extract fees from now are just belly up and insolvent 10 years from now, and you're just negotiating with streaming networks. That's when they can start to drive the price down, because you're not delivering a product that people are going to actively seek out. And particularly during the regular season where it's 82 games and everybody knows that it doesn't matter, and there are competitive incentives for the teams to rest players and really pace themselves throughout the regular season. If you were able to take some of the extra cash that they are getting from this deal and use it to alleviate the pain of shortening the regular season so that the games do become more event-like programming during the regular season and more competitively relevant for the best teams in the league, then you're creating a product that people are maybe more likely to seek out. And the failure to think 2 and 3 steps down the road, and I'm sure that, I don't want to say they're not thinking about this, but they haven't been able to do this in terms of restructuring the way the product works and what the value proposition is. I think could hurt them in the long run on the next deal, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, we were proven wrong on this deal, so maybe they'll continue to reap the benefits for years to come.
I think I was proven wrong on specifically triple. I don't know if I said it wasn't going to be triple, but I definitely had a conversation with you where your podcast host, co-host on the GOAT, Ben Golliver, was talking triple, and we were going, man, like, Ben, I don't know what's good. Like, he's really, they go into these games, they got him drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't know if it's like they're whining and dining him or what, but I think, triple's a surprise to me. Double, not so much a surprise. But they're two different conversations. The conversation of cultural relevance and cultural purchase versus how much you get paid for it. And that's a different situation. They are connected in the end, though. I'm suspicious when people start saying it doesn't even matter what the ratings are. I go, well, isn't that a measure of how many customers you have? I mean, theoretically, it eventually has to. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds?
Well, and there are structural forces. Yeah, there are structural forces that render these choices from the linear bidders more rational. But if you're having to deliver audience to streamers 10 years from now, you're going to have to actually deliver audience and have a product that people are going to actively seek out. And you're also going to struggle if you go on streaming. You're going to struggle with customer acquisition and actually reaching people. Like, that's why doing a deal to stay on ESPN is smart for the NBA, and also potentially NBC, and being on broadcast is great for the league because you want to be in people's living rooms. Whereas once you become a streaming product that people have to actually seek out, I think it's going to get much harder to reach the, Gen Y. I don't know what the generation after Gen Z
is. Alpha, I think, is the term of art right now. This is the emerging teenage generation.
That's when the monoculture will really erode. So look forward to that.
Let's end on this right here. You had a great email into your podcast with Ben Thompson on Sharp Tech about these streaming NFL games and how maybe the sneaky idea behind it all, because they're happening on Christmas and holidays, is to finally wring subscription dollars out of the boomer that just doesn't even know how to set this sort of thing up, because they're all surrounded by loving family members who will help you watch a big event game like that. What do you make? I feel like I would be mad if I was on these broadcast networks and I signed this deal with the NFL, and it just seems like they're selling these games out the back of their trunk to Netflix.
Right.
As the big thing you got to watch.
That's a good visual.
What's your take on
it? Well, I don't blame the NFL. And the NFL has so much leverage over all of its partners because they're media property is like 10 to 20 times more valuable than anything else these people are putting on television, that the partners could be upset and they're still going to fall in line when the NFL tells them to. I think it's more interesting on the Netflix side, just in terms of the experimentation that they're doing here. And they have so much power that they could get into sports if they want to, but they're also really careful about their costs. And so they may just say, we're going to let everybody else overspend on sports, and we're just going to be the entertainment option for, the next generation of TV viewers or phone viewers or wherever people are watching. But I think right now it's sort of an open question, and particularly as they try to get their advertising business bootstrapped and off the ground, this Christmas football experiment will be the sort of thing that spurs action and potentially makes advertisers more comfortable advertising on Netflix, and forces internal action in terms of like getting the tech where it needs to be to make it all work. But right now, I don't know what direction Netflix will go in the long run.
Yeah, I just think Rogers he's got to impress. These NFL owners are looking at what Adam did, and you gotta, it's like maybe you didn't negotiate so great last time. It was probably had more to do with Warner Brothers being in a very strange situation where they go belly up, and
they couldn't find another bidder. The NFL had a bunch of existing partners, and those existing partners spent a ton of money on NFL rights, but there wasn't a player on the outside that wanted to make a splash and get in on football rights. And so there's only so much you can push people when they're bidding against themselves, would be my guess on how it played out.
Yeah, if NBC wasn't interested in the NBA, maybe it's a different story, and maybe it would have been something that would be more affordable for Warner Brothers. And that still hasn't sorted itself out. You keep getting these little media details that maybe a little haunch of content will be available for Warner Brothers, so we can still continue to be delighted by the inside guys. We will see. It will be. I won't even say it.
It will be interesting to see.
It will be. That's why it's so easy to say it. I find myself saying it on a podcast, because what else are you going to say when you stop talking about something? It just sounds too weird to go. And now we are done.
Yeah, exactly. I ran into that not on the finals preview podcast, but on a Greatest of All Talk I recorded late last week, where we were like 10 days out from the finals. I found myself saying, yep, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We'll see what it turns into, like 5 different times. So we're all guilty of it. Even JJ probably does it on Mind the Game. They probably edit it out, though.
Yeah, edit that out. God, I want to know what kind of coach
want to
he's
sound
like.
Smart. Yeah.
Don't you want to know what kind of coach he might be like? What if he's a totally different guy and he just goes in, listen up, pussies. He's just a madman. There's no wine. He's an alcoholic, like that coach in Hoosiers. What about that? That would be fantastic. I'd be into that.
Maybe he's been saving all of his takes for the coaching career that apparently isn't going to launch in Los Angeles. We'll have to wait and see.
Oh, my God. Oh, yeah. The JJ, he might be the muse of 2024. I don't think he will be. I think Caitlin Clark might win. We'll see.
Is this the House of Strauss muse?
Yeah. Yeah, the House of Strauss muse. Brock Purdy was the muse of 2023. I don't know who the muse of 2022 is. It might have been, you think Purdy going back to back is what Mays says? It could be Purdy. I think it's Caitlin Clark, unless you can throw in someone there other than Redick, who's in competition.
I just love that you think that you still get to make the decision on who the muse is. As established, Adam Silver is the new editorial director of House of Strauss. So wait on the email and see what direction he wants to go.
Yeah, who does he want my muse to be? He might want Caitlin Clark to be my muse. We might have agreed on this. And this is why Adam Silver wins all negotiations right here. I
can't take any more Caitlin Clark coverage. I need the NBA Finals to start. I'm sorry.
You vicious sexist. Unbelievable that you said that. But that's the advantage of working in independent media, is you can say such a thing without severe consequences.
I want nothing but success for all of them. I watch basketball half my waking life and don't have more bandwidth for more basketball all summer long, although I will clock in for the Paris Olympics. And I enjoy the odd WNBA game here and there. I do not discuss the WNBA on the internet as a rule because people are just too crazy about it no matter what you say. But I wish nothing but the best for Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, everyone.
They're not crazy about it. They're crazy about policing other people talking about it. It's this strange ricochet effect that I've experienced. Oh, okay. One last question, actually, more specific to your role and what you do, because last time you were on, we got more into who you are and what you do, but I'm interested in it. And it's this, we finally are able to ask some questions. People might not know this, but what Andrew is really good at, he's like a millennial Ernie Johnson is what I would say. He's a table setter for the takes of others. It's a selfless act that this man does. And he has conversation. When you listen to him on the GOAT, that's more when you are the guy performing. But when you're doing Sharp Tech and you're doing it with our friend Ben Thompson, who I think is a genius,
right?
And it's almost like YouTube clips you'll see of somebody getting tossed a Rubik's Cube and they just go, he'll do that with how a multinational corporation functions on this granular level. You go, Nike, go. And he's like, just, he'll just do it.
He also uncork a solid 25 years of history. He'll sort of digress along the way. So it keeps me on my toes for sure.
Well, I'm wondering, when you're in that table setting role and you're an opinionated guy and you've got your takes, do you know when to push back, when to argue with Ben? When do you feel safe doing that? I mean, when you do it, do you feel like you're really going over the middle in football parlance?
Yes. That's actually a great way to articulate what it's like going back and forth with Ben on tech, because there's such a deep reservoir of knowledge with Ben, and a lot of what we discuss on Sharp Tech, like AI infrastructure, for instance, and NVIDIA and chips, I am very new to that space. Like, if we're talking about the business of streaming and the way people consume entertainment these days, I'm pretty fluent and I can go back and forth and have a lot of fun with him. And we also don't get into arguments on that stuff. We get into arguments on antitrust, famously. They get pretty contested. But in terms of the disagreements on AI, it's just such a dense universe of language and history and hard tech that I tend to defer to him, and I have to really be on my P's and Q's. On the most recent episode, actually, we were talking about AI skepticism and how I am adopting a wait and see approach, but I also have to approach some of the skepticism that I have about the more outlandish AI claims with uncommon humility for me, because many of the people who are making the most outlandish AI claims are unbelievably intelligent and have been working on this for the last 5 to 7 years. And it is really impressive how far AI has come. So I would say I strike that balance very carefully when talking to Ben. And I enjoy listening back to the episodes and being like, wow, Ben was able to break that down in 10 minutes. And I now feel like I understand it. And so I want to give that to the audience more than give my own takes on whatever the dense topic may be. As we sort of shift to more familiar topics, that's where people enjoy us going back and forth.
Yeah, well, I would say Sharp Tech is the mind the game of the tech business space.
But we don't take ourselves that seriously. We have more fun than mind the game. I just want to make that very clear.
They're drinking red wine. I haven't seen you guys crack anything open. It seems pretty
Yeah.
As casual as it is brilliant is what I would say about Mind the Game. Andrew, this has been delightful. Would love to have you back. Everybody, check him out on the 85 podcasts that he's a part of.
Yes, subscribe to Stratechery, and you can get access to Greatest of All Talk, Sharp China, and Sharp Tech, in addition to daily writing from Ben Thompson, who is the best tech writer on the planet. So it's a great deal.
There you go. The ultimate wingman. His final plug is for Ben. That's selflessness, people. Yeah. That's why the Boston Celtics will win the championship. Unless they don't, in which case, clip this out, Anthony. All right. Thanks, man.
Take it easy.